Hi, this is David White from Sportsman's Emporium. I'm going to talk a little bit about muskie fly fishing today and just the very basic gear that you would need to go out and chase muskie with the fly rod. First of all, you know, the rod and the reel size is probably the most common question. A lot of guys, you know, are going to start out with something like an 8 weight, and you'll read on the internet that you can go all the way up to like a 12 weight for these big muskie in the big lakes, especially up in the north or Midwest. Around here, you know, it's generally about the same. I use basically two different setups when I muskie fly fish. I use an 8 weight and a 10 weight. And the reason I use the difference between the two doesn't really have to do with the size of the fish per se, but it's really about the size of the fly that I'm throwing and how far I want to cast it. For instance, if I'm fishing on a lake or a big river like the Mon River, I'll use a 10 weight. I'll use a lot bigger of a setup, more of a saltwater setup. This is a Redington Predator. It's made for those big, humongous flies. And the reason I'll use the heavier of the two on the big water is because a lot of times I'm using a little bit bigger flies and I need to get them further through the air. And it's really the weight of the line and the difference between the 10 weight and the 8 weight line that'll carry my fly a little bit further and even throw a bigger fly through the air. These flies are really light and they're made of feathers and fur, and they're really aerated. So it takes a heavy line to carry these things through the air, because you want to cast as far as you can cast with the muskie in general. So really, when I'm fishing big water for the fly rod setup, I like to use a 10 weight, and that's if I'm going to be casting as far as I can cast, like 60, 70 feet casts. You know, that tends to work a little bit better for me. On smaller muskie streams, like per se the Buchanan River, where it's not quite as big as the Mon or a lake, and when I'm out there, I'm on a kayak or a raft, and if I'm out in the center, I can cast to both shores relatively easily. So a lighter rod setup would be my choice for that. An 8 weight gets my flies out there good enough to fish the smaller stuff, and I'm also using a little bit smaller flies on average. The reason I don't use my 10 weight on small streams, I could use the 10 weight, but it's really just longevity of my shoulder and strength. Got a little bit of rain, but when I'm using my 8 weight, it's a little bit lighter. The reel's lighter, the rod's lighter, and it's not much lighter, but when you're casting big flies all day from a boat, a few ounces makes a big difference. So that's really it for the rods. Now, like I say, around here, I think an 8 weight would be good to get started on. If you really get into it and get serious, I would upgrade to a 10 weight, because eventually you're going to want to chase them on bigger water. Flies that you're going to need are really just any big streamer fly. A lot of these flies started out as bass and trout patterns, and you're just tying them bigger and amplifying them for muskie. This is just one of my own creations. I don't really have a name for it, but I will say the colors fit the theme of the fire tiger colors. It has the chartreuse, black, and orange. Those are really popular colors for the muskie fly fishing. They're attracted to bright colors. And this has bucktail in it, so when I move it through the water, it makes a nice whooshing sound. This fly right here will sink just under the surface and probably fish about 6 to 10 inches deep. This fly here is just a big deer hair popper fly. It's, if you can imagine those little poppers that you catch bluegill and bass off of in farm ponds, this is a muskie sized version made of deer hair that I've cut and shaped into basically a cone shape so it floats, and it has a marabou tail. This kind of looks a little bit more like a frog, but mostly it just makes a lot of commotion and noise on the water, which attracts muskie. This floats on the surface, and when you strip it to you, it pops and splashes the water, so everything's visual. When a muskie hits it, that popping will attract them. And when the muskie hits it, since it's on the surface, you get to see it all happen right in front of you, and it's pretty cool. So those are really two types of flies. This is a subsurface fly made for fishing under the water. It has a little bit of weight, on the hook shank, and this is made to float on the surface of the water, and it's just a big noisy attractor fly. So those are some of the basic flies. But a couple other things I think that you would definitely need if you've been a trout fisherman for years, you might not have these things, are a good pair of long reach pliers and a pair of scissors. And the reason being is muskie have razor sharp teeth, and they have a lot of them. So when you are trying to get your hook out, popping it out with your thumb like you do on a trout won't work. You'll cut yourself up. So you want to get a pair of these long reach pliers. Just even a regular pair of needle nose pliers out of your toolbox will work. The ones made for fishing are nice because, you know, they have their little chain that you can put them on, and they have a nice pouch that you can attach to your fishing vest, and that's really nice to have. But really any needle nose pliers will work. Another thing is a small pair of scissors. This is just a little pair of Rapala fishing scissors. You can get them anywhere. And the reason you want these is you're cutting through wire braid. When you're fishing for these muskie, because of the teeth, you're using really strong leaders and line. And to cut through those, biting through them with your teeth or using nail clippers won't work. So you have to have something a little bit stronger. And that actually leads me to the final thing, is what do you use for a leader and tippet? You can't use regular monofilament fishing line because the muskie will bite right through it. So there are companies like Rio that are making a knottable, tieable wire tippet made for muskie and pike and any fish with teeth. And they call it the wire bite tippet. And this stuff is really good. It's a 20-pound wire, and you can tie any intricate knot with it. It's really good stuff. You can get this stuff, or you can go to any sports shop, even Walmart or Dunham's or a shop like Sportsman's Emporium, and get just regular steel cable and just get the real thin stuff, the 7-strand, and you can use like a foot of that as your bite tippet. You can use a regular leader as if you were bass fishing. Just you want it to be strong in the 15 to 20 pound variety, but make sure the last 1 foot of your leader is a good, you know, wire tippet.